This footage you are currently watching is from my character in Afflictions of Core, and as you can see, it trivializes most of the Uber abilities in the base game to an extreme degree. And it should be able to do that to a lot of them in the Gauntlet as well. Honestly, the way I initially arrived at this build was just by watching Junkrown's as a hardcore character, and then deciding to actually put some defense on the character. The main damaging ability is the new cremation of Exhuming, which scales its damage from corpses coming from your disintegrate. Yeah, I know. Cool and interesting new concept that hasn't been done ever before. And there hasn't been anything even remotely similar that has won a bunch of events before. With all that said, this build is definitely not for the average Gauntlet player. It will be difficult even for the very best players to put this together in 10 days. It is just enough time, but it requires efficient farming for the entirety of the Gauntlet, and it requires you to start on a really good build. Realistically, on Ranger this means you will be playing Pathfinder Toxic Rain for 95% of the Gauntlet, or you have to start on a different class. The options are like Juggernaut Bone Shatter, maybe Slayer Bone Shatter, Necromancer Welder Dead, or any other build that can efficiently farm this gear, but keep in mind that if you don't start on Pathfinder, you will have to level a new Ranger and craft all the Toxic Rain gear anyways, and spend days to level to 98, 99, which you will probably need before bossing. So that is the main reason why I'm leaning towards actually just straight up starting Pathfinder Toxic Rain. Even if I feel like 1-to-1 Juggernaut Bone Shatter is a better build, same for Volatile did Necro, but the disadvantages of having to reroll afterwards are just too high. If I'm being completely honest, I don't even know if I can put this build together in 10 days. But I still believe this will be the build that is gonna win the Gauntlet, because as far as I know, both Ben and Nick and probably a bunch of others are going to try to put something similar together. With all that said, this character was actually very easy to create in Trade League environment. And even if I somehow end up not being able to put it together in the Gauntlet event, I might try something similar next league start, possibly even using DD of Chain Reaction instead of Cremation of Exhuming. A few quick disclaimers: you cannot level as this build, you cannot map as this build, its entire purpose is to defeat bosses and potentially some invitations. It's not a real build, it's just a tool for one very specific purpose. Don't just roll this build to try it out to play the game normally. Let's go over the stats of the build first real quick, and then focus on the key items that enable this build and the ones that make it difficult to actually put together. Despite us rocking solid 55 max LRS, thanks to the Transcendence Keystone, our max hit is actually very high against all elements, except Chaos, which doesn't matter at all for bossing except for Cirrus Meteor, which I don't think we will actually be tanking in Gauntlet, well, not on purpose at least. Physical hit damage is a non-issue for this version of the build due to having 100% physical to elemental conversion, but it is one of the reasons we had to compromise a lot of our damage over time defense, which became one of the weaknesses of this build. Those are going to be the leading cause of death for anyone trying this build, and we do our best while gearing to mitigate it, but there's only so much we can do with the tools available in the 10 days of Gauntlet. The item that this whole build revolves around is Inextricable Fate. Boots from either worlds that make all damage poison while the enemy is affected by Grasping Vines, and also inflict those Grasping Vines. This not only allows our fire damage to poison, but also gives us 100% chance to poison. I normally hate these boots and always saw them as a big meme, but it turns out that if you are able to tank most of boss mechanics, the bosses don't really move that much. The one alternative to those were Vulcan Gloves, but they were just not strong enough to be honest. You half your damage because of 50% less poison duration, you had to drop Tempest Shield for Herald of Agony, which suddenly makes Shock a problem that you have to solve, and having to invest into poison chance on the tree makes it a lot more awkward. The image shown in POB might not be 100% accurate because there's a lot of ramp associated, not only with the poison itself, but also the Grasping Vines that we need to actually inflict the poison. And the average corpse life, I'm not 100% sure whether it's accurate, but what I do know, this build does more than enough damage to kill all Ubers, both in the base game and in the Gauntlet. For defense, as previously mentioned, we are running the Transcendence Keystone, which makes our armor apply to elemental damage at the cost of it not working for physical. But we completely ignore that downside by using Lightning Coil, Dawnbreaker, Taste of Hate, and the Crafted Helm mod to convert all of it into elemental. With 80,000 to 90,000 armor, mostly coming from Determination, Grace, or Jade Flask, that pretty much solves all elemental hit mitigation. The item that truly puts the defense over the top is Eternal Damnation. And this is where the big problem actually starts. Not only is Sanctum in Gauntlet very difficult, but there's also a chance you just get unlucky and never see one, even if you don't fail a single Sanctum during the 10 days. With that said, focusing all your efforts at farming ED is the best course of action, And it not only makes Transcendence a lot more efficient due to how armor works against bigger hits, but it also provides a huge dot damage mitigation. Lastly, we are taking Leadership because without it, any dot would evaporate this character in a fraction of a second. There's an argument to use Slur Weave instead of Lightning Coil, but it just makes us too weak against physical damage. It might work better in some fights, but personally, with ED, I would just use Coil for every fight. Another time-consuming adventure is Gauntlet might become the quest to obtain the Oscillating Scepter from Heist, which is supposed to be about 1 in 100-ish wings, but of course, if unlucky, it could take a lot longer. But it is well worth the time since it increases our damage by about 25%. The last craftable items that are worth mentioning are clusters. The POB has the best cluster possible, but it is very difficult to craft. Realistically speaking, any decent 8-point Chaos, Fire, or Elemental cluster will have to do during the limited time. Medium class cluster is the Pathfinder Classic by now, Spike Concoction, and Peak Vigor. And the other cluster can just be any random Chaos dot or normal dot cluster with two notables. I think the best ones are Flow of Life and Circling Oblivion. The Militant Fate has nothing special on it, it literally keeps all the notes as they were just before, it just changes Acrobatics to Transcendence. For charms, we use a Frenzy Generator, Poison Duration Charm, and either Banner Reservation or Reservation Efficiency. Chance Evader on hit can also be very good, because maintaining 15 stacks is difficult on bosses where you can't consistently use Withering Step. I hope you guys enjoyed the look into what I think is the build that is gonna win this gauntlet. If you have a different prediction on the best build, please let me know in the comments, ideally with a POP as it's not too late to change my build. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Gauntlet content either tomorrow or on Friday. I'll try to release a detailed Gauntlet progression guide for Jack Bonechatter, which I believe is the easiest build to attempt the Gauntlet with if your goal isn't to kill Uber bosses.